The artifact arrived in a shipping container marked with symbols no one at Vought could read. It came through channels that didn't officially exist, purchased from a dealer whose credentials raised more questions than they answered. The crate sat in a secure facility beneath Manhattan for 3 days before anyone opened it. When they did, 2 things happened. First, the consultant they'd hired, a man who claimed expertise in interdimensional antiquities, touched the shard and immediately stumbled backward, blood streaming from his nose. Second, every camera in the room went dark for exactly 4 seconds. The object itself looked unremarkable. A fragment of something larger, maybe a cup or bowl covered in markings that shifted depending on the angle. Gold, but not quite. The color changed in the light, never settling on a single shade. One of the techs joked it looked like a movie prop. No one laughed. "What did you feel?" asked Dr. Sarah Chen, lead researcher for what Vaught's internal memos called the URUK initiative. She kept her distance from the examination table, tablet in hand, already documenting. The consultant wiped his nose with a handkerchief that came away red. "Judgment," he said. His hands shook. "Like being weighed and found. Wanting." Chen made a note. "Psychological effect. Possible mimetic properties. Continue." But the consultant was already backing toward the door. "You don't understand. This isn't an object. It's a door. And something on the other side knows we're here." He quit that afternoon. Vought replaced him within the hour. The next phase required infrastructure. They built what the engineers called an anchor, a containment field designed to stabilize dimensional rifts without collapsing them entirely. The technology was borrowed from 6 different sources, most of them classified, none of them proven at this scale. The shard sat at the center of a web of machinery that hummed with power it barely contained. "Walk me through the readings again," said Stan Edgar, watching from behind reinforced glass. He'd come down personally for this. That alone told Chen how much capital the company had sunk into the project. "The shard responds to attention," Chen explained, highlighting data on her screen. "Not just observation, belief. When we ran the test with the focus group, 20 people told this was an ancient relic of divine origin. The energy output spiked 40%. So it feeds on faith, or recognition. The more people who believe in its significance, the more stable the rift becomes." She pulled up another graph. "We think we can use media coverage, social media engagement. A controlled rollout with the right narrative could..." "Could what?" Edgar's voice carried the weight of a man who'd built empires on calculated risks. "Summon something we can't control. We have contingencies." Chen gestured to the kill switches, the fail-safes, the 12 different ways they could theoretically shut this down if it went wrong. On paper, they were prepared for anything. Edgar studied the shard through the glass. "And if those contingencies fail?" Chen didn't have an answer for that. The rift opened 3 days later during a late-night calibration test. No warning. No gradual escalation. One moment the anchor hummed with its usual baseline frequency. The next, reality cracked. The technicians on duty described it differently. Some said the air folded. Others said it tore. One woman insisted she saw eyes in the gap between seconds, watching with the patience of something that had waited millennia and could wait millennia more. What they all agreed on was the silence. When the rift stabilized, sound died, not muffled, absent, as if the world held its breath. He stepped through like he was entering a room he owned. Tall, golden armor that caught the fluorescent lights and made them look cheap by comparison. Hair like spun metal face carved with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never questioned his right to everything he surveyed. He looked at the machinery, at the shard, at the people scrambling for protocols they'd never actually believed they'd need. His eyes red and gold, shifting like the shard itself moved across the facility with the deliberate assessment of someone appraising property. Fascinating. His voice carried perfectly in the dead air. English, though his accent belonged to no country anyone recognized. You've built a cage for a throne. Dr. Chen, to her credit, didn't run. Who are you? He smiled. Not warmth, not cruelty. Simple amusement at the question itself. I am the King of Heroes, he said, each word falling like a stone into still water. And you have called me to a kingdom built on lies and sold to mongrels. One of the security guards moved for his weapon. He didn't draw it. The golden circles that materialized behind the stranger's shoulders, portals, windows, gates to somewhere else changed his mind. Each one held something that gleamed with edges and purpose. Stand down, Chen said quietly. She'd studied enough mythology to recognize power when it stood in front of her. Please. The stranger Gilgamesh, if the ancient texts they'd cross-referenced were accurate, tilted his head slightly. Polite, unexpected. He looked past her toward the observation room, where Stan Edgar watched. But your master knows fear when he smells it. Tell me, little architect, what did you think would ant when you knocked? Chen swallowed. We thought we could negotiate. Negotiate. He tested the word like a whine he might spit out. How very modern. The gates behind him vanished as casually as they'd appeared. Very well. I will see what you've built here, what you call power, what you dare to name heroes. He walked past her armor, clicking softly against itself, moving like someone who expected doors to open before he reached them. And then, he said already halfway to the elevator, we will discuss who truly owns this world. The facility's emergency systems kicked in 30 seconds later, flooding the room with light and sound as if desperate to fill the void he'd left behind. But everyone present knew the truth that would filter up through Vaught's chain of command within the hour. They hadn't summoned a weapon. They'd invited a king, and he'd just started his audit. The boardroom on the 73rd floor had hosted senators, foreign dignitaries, and every superhero Vought had ever put under contract. None of them had looked at the room the way Gilgamesh did, like he was cataloging assets for seizure. Stan Edgar sat at the head of the table, flanked by legal counsel and two executives whose sole purpose was to look confident. The King of Heroes stood by the windows, watching Manhattan sprawl beneath him, with the interest one might give an anthill. We've prepared a comprehensive partnership proposal. Edgar began, sliding a leather portfolio across the table. Brand integration, media rights, merchandising, no. The word landed with finality. Edgar, to his credit, didn't flinch. You haven't seen the terms? I don't need to. Gilgamesh turned from the window. His armor caught the morning light and threw it back sharper. You trade in symbols, bright costumes, and empty promises. What you call power is marketing. One of the lawyers cleared her throat. Mr. Your Majesty, we represent the most successful superhero enterprise in the world. Our talent roster includes pets. He moved to the table but didn't sit. Well-trained, well-fed, and utterly leashed. His gaze settled on Edgar. Tell me what you truly possess here. Not the theater, not the merchandise. What do you actually own? Edgar leaned back, reassessing. The man across from him wasn't impressed by revenue reports or market dominance. Information, he said finally. We know things about everyone who matters. Senators, judges, competitors, even our own heroes. A slight pause. especially our own heroes. Ah. Something like approval flickered across Gilgamesh's face. Blackmail, leverage, secrets that rot in the dark. He gestured at the portfolio, and one of the golden portals materialized behind him, just a glimpse of the treasury beyond. These are worthy treasures. Continue. The executives exchanged glances. Edgar pressed on. We have contingencies for asset management, including... He nodded to the head of security in the corner, who activated a wall display showing technical schematics. The V protocol, designed to neutralize any superhuman who becomes non-compliant. Gilgamesh studied the diagrams with casual interest. Sonic disruptors, neural inhibitors, compounds that could shut down enhanced biology at the cellular level. You build cages for your pets. Prudent. We prefer to think of it as insurance. Edgar signaled the security chief, who input a code. We'd like to demonstrate purely for transparency that our systems are robust. The activation was supposed to be subtle, a low-frequency pulse, calibrated to cause discomfort without permanent damage. A warning shot. The emitters in the ceiling hummed to life. Gilgamesh stood absolutely still. The pulse washed over him like water over stone. He didn't flinch, didn't stumble. The only change was the slight narrowing of his eyes, the look of someone who'd just confirmed a suspicion. Fascinating, he said softly. You test the bars before locking the cage. One of the portals opened wider. A single blade, ancient perfect, drifted out and hovered at eye level with the security chief. But you've made an error in measurement. Edgar raised a hand and the pulse cut off immediately. Noted. We're prepared to adjust protocols. You misunderstand. Gilgamesh walked along the table, trailing fingers across the polished surface. I'm not negotiating entry into your system. I'm determining whether your system deserves to continue existing. The blade rotated slowly in the air, catching reflections of everyone in the room. The control codes for your kill switch, Gilgamesh continued. The access protocols. The infrastructure that lets you activate these insurance policies. He smiled without warmth. They belong to me now. That's not possible, the lawyer said. Those systems are air-gapped, encrypted with keys and locks and firewalls built by mortals who thought themselves clever. He turned to Edgar. Everything of value becomes part of the treasury. Data is simply another form of wealth, and you've left your vault standing open. Edgar's expression didn't change, but his hands pressed flat against the table. You're bluffing. Gilgamesh gestured and the wall display flickered. The V protocol schematics disappeared, replaced by something that made every lawyer in the room go pale. Personnel files, medical records, videos that should have been scrubbed from existence. A digital paper trail of every compromise, every cover-up, every body Vought had buried in 40 years. Your blackmail, Gilgamesh said. Now mine, your leverage. Now mine, your insurance against your own heroes. He dismissed the display with a wave. Also mine. The head of marketing, a woman who'd survived 3 CEO transitions, spoke carefully. What do you want? An interesting question. Gilgamesh finally sat, choosing a chair at random rather than the designated guest seat. What I want is to see what you've built with these stolen scraps of power. This world that crowns mediocrity and calls it heroism. He looked at Edgar. You planned an event, a reveal, something with cameras and crowds. VaughtCon, Edgar confirmed. We were going to introduce you as our latest Acquisition, yes. How quaint. Gilgamesh waved dismissively. Proceed with your spectacle. I will tolerate your theater. Why? Edgar asked bluntly. You've made it clear you don't need us. You've taken our leverage. Why agree to anything? Gilgamesh stood armor shifting with him like liquid gold. Because I've learned something useful in the brief time since my arrival. He moved to the windows again, looking down at the city. This world runs on attention, on worship disguised as viewership, on belief masquerading as engagement. He turned back to face them. Your shard, the anchor you use to maintain my presence here, it stabilizes when eyes are watching. When masses gather and bear witness. His smile was sharp as the blade still floating beside the security chief. You've built a kingdom where power flows from spectacle. How perfectly appropriate. So you'll let us proceed, Edgar said slowly, because you need the audience. I'll let you proceed because it amuses me to see you scramble. Gilgamesh moved toward the door and it opened before he touched it, possibly automated, possibly not. And because when I dismantle what you've built, I want the world watching. No shadows, no quiet collapse. Everything you've constructed exposed under lights bright enough that no one can claim ignorance. He paused in the doorway. Prepare your event. Polish your cameras. Gather your crowds. The blade finally dismissed itself, vanishing back into the treasury. And pray that when I judge what you've created, some small fragment proves worthy of preservation. The door closed behind him with a soft click. For 10 seconds, no one in the boardroom moved. Then Edgar picked up his phone. Get me Ashley and the security team, and someone who can tell me how much damage control we're going to need. He looked at the lawyers. Also, someone find out if contracts have any legal standing with entities that predate the concept of written law. The head of marketing stared at the door. Are we really going through with VaughtCon? Edgar's expression was carved from ice. He's right about one thing. This world runs on spectacle. If we're going to manage this disaster, we do it in front of the biggest audience possible. He stood straightening his tie. At least then, when it all goes to hell, we'll have ratings. Outside in the private elevator, descending from the executive floor, Gilgamesh allowed himself a moment of genuine satisfaction. The anchor hummed in the sub-levels below, feeding on the fear and fascination rippling through Vaught's infrastructure. Every camera that had captured his image, every employee who'd heard the rumors, every executive now scrambling to contain something they'd never actually controlled. Worship took many forms, and he'd just converted an entire corporation into his congregation. Homelander heard about the new asset 3 hours before he saw him. That was 3 hours too late. He'd been in makeup when Ashley burst in, tablet shaking in her hands, stammering something about a situation and adjustments to the VaughtCon lineup. Homelander had stopped listening after the word adjust. Nobody adjusted his schedule. Nobody shared his spotlight. He was the 7. Everyone else was set dressing. Who is he? Homelander asked, voice flat as glass. Ashley pulled up footage from the executive floor security feed. A figure in gold walking through Vought Tower like he owned it. Not posturing, not performing, just moving through space as if everything in it existed at his discretion. His name is, we're calling him Gilgamesh. He's part of a new initiative. I didn't approve any new initiative. It came from Stan directly. They want to position him as a mythological figure, ancient power. Ties into the rebrand where Homelander crushed the armrest of his chair, leather and foam compressed under his grip metal frame groaning. I'm the rebrand. I'm the face of this company. Of course you are. Ashley's voice hit that particular frequency of terror masked as reassurance. This is just supplementary. You're still the headliner. He's support. Support. Homelander tasted the word and found it bitter. Show me more. The next clip showed the boardroom. Edgar sitting across from someone who hadn't bothered to take the guest chair. The conversation was too quiet for the cameras to catch, but body language told the story. Edgar unshakable. Calculating Edgar had the posture of a man playing chess against someone who might flip the board. When do I meet him? Homelander asked. Actually, he's requested access to the Seven's training facility. He wants to, and I'm quoting here, assess the quality of what passes for strength in this era. The makeup artist took a careful step backward. Homelander smiled. Not the camera smile, the real one. Perfect. I'll give him a personal tour. The training facility occupied 3 sub-levels beneath Vought Tower. Reinforced walls, climate control equipment designed to withstand superhuman stress testing. Homelander found Gilgamesh standing in the center of the main floor examining a weight rack like it was a museum exhibit of primitive tools. You must be the new guy. Homelander descended from the observation deck cape, settling perfectly behind him. Practiced entrance, maximum impact. Heard you've been making quite the impression upstairs. Gilgamesh turned. Up close, his presence was different. Not the manufactured charisma of media training. Something older. Something that made Homelander's jaw tighten involuntarily. You're the one they dress in a flag, Gilgamesh observed. No question, no interest. Just a statement of fact. I'm Homelander, leader of the 7, strongest man alive. He let the words carry weight. They always did. And you're the fresh face Stan thinks will boost ratings. I am the king of heroes. Gilgamesh's tone held the same inflection someone might use to state the sky is blue. And you are a product. Well marketed, no doubt. But still a product. The temperature in the room didn't change, but something shifted. Homelander's smile held frozen in place. Careful. New people sometimes forget how things work around here. Who sits at the top? The top of what? Gilgamesh gestured around the facility. This training equipment for children playing at strength, soft mats so you don't bruise when you fall. He met Homelander's gaze without flinching, without the fear that usually lived in people's eyes. You've never fought anyone truly dangerous, have you? Never faced consequence. I could end you before you finished that sentence. Could you? Gilgamesh tilted his head slightly. Or would you find that your power borrowed, manufactured, pumped into your veins by scientists pales against something earned through trial and conquest? Homelander moved. Not flight, not yet. Just a step forward, closing distance, using his height advantage. I don't need to earn anything. I was born to be what I am. You were made. Gilgamesh didn't retreat. Grown in a laboratory, raised by researchers, given strength without ever having to prove yourself worthy of it. He smiled, and it held no warmth whatsoever. You rule by fear of what you might do. I rule by right of what I have done. The golden portals materialized so quickly, Homelander almost flinched. Almost. They hovered in the air like open wounds in reality, each one containing edges and points and things that gleamed with purpose. Not a threat display, a statement of fact. Cute trick, Homelander said, heat building behind his eyes. Want to see mine? I've seen parlor tricks before. But the portals remain patient and certain. Your heat vision, your flight, your manufactured invulnerability, all impressive to those who know nothing better. He took a step closer, and despite himself, Homelander felt his weight shift backward. But you've never stood before someone who doesn't need cameras to validate their existence, who doesn't require adoration to feel powerful. I don't need anything, Homelander snapped. Then why are you sweating? Homelander wasn't. But his heart rate had climbed. His breathing had shifted. Micro-responses he'd trained himself to suppress, now betraying him in front of someone who could apparently read them. You need the crowd, Gilgamesh continued, voice level and precise. The applause, the worship. Without it, you're hollow, a costume without substance. The portals drifted closer, lazy and inevitable. You govern through fear of abandonment, not fear of your power. That's why you've already lost this conversation. I haven't lost anything. The heat vision was ready. One blast, center mass. Show this arrogant relic what real power looked like. I could kill me. Gilgamesh didn't sound concerned. Perhaps. In this moment, with surprise on your side, you might succeed. He gestured at the facility around them. But then cameras would show footage of you murdering Vought's newest asset. Your handlers would scramble. Your image would crack, and you... He leaned in slightly, voice dropping. You would spend every remaining day wondering if you attacked because you were stronger or because you were terrified I might be. Homelander's hands curled into fists. The leather of his gloves creaked. VaughtCon is in 48 hours, Gilgamesh said, stepping back. The portals vanished as casually as they'd appeared. I'm told we're sharing a stage. Do try not to embarrass yourself in front of the peasants you claim to rule. He walked toward the exit, boots clicking on the training floor. This isn't over? Homelander called after him. Gilgamesh paused at the doorway. No, he agreed. It hasn't truly begun. But when it does... He glanced back and his eyes caught the light like cut gemstones. You'll understand the difference between a king and a mascot. The door closed. Homelander stood alone in the training facility, surrounded by equipment designed to make him feel invincible. His reflection stared back from the mirrored walls. Perfect hair. Perfect suit. Perfect smile. He lasered the nearest mirror into slag. In the elevator ascending back to his penthouse, breathing carefully controlled, Homelander made a decision. VaughtCon would happen. The cameras would roll, the crowds would gather. And when they did, he'd show this ancient relic what power actually meant in the modern world. He'd show everyone. His hands were still shaking when the elevator doors opened. 3 floors below, in a conference room. Ashley had commandeered for crisis management. Her team assembled damage control protocols they hoped they'd never need. Video feeds showed Homelander's penthouse. Lights off. No movement. He's going to do something stupid, one of the PR coordinators muttered. Ashley didn't disagree. She pulled up the VaughtCon schedule and started calculating how many cameras they could position to capture the inevitable disaster from flattering angles. Because in the end, even catastrophe could be content, as long as someone was watching. VaughtCon filled MetLife Stadium the way only manufactured spectacle could. 80,000 seats packed with fans who'd paid premium prices to see their heroes in person. Screens the size of buildings broadcast every angle. Hashtags trended before the event even started. Outside, protesters held signs about corporate accountability, while inside, vendors sold $40 t-shirts with Homelander's face. Billy Butcher watched from the nosebleed section, binoculars trained on the stage. Fuck me, they actually did it. Rolled out the red carpet for a walking war crime. 2 walking war crimes. MM corrected, studying the program on his phone. Says here Gilgamesh is scheduled for a 7-minute segment. Introduction, demonstration of abilities, photo op with a 7. 7 minutes. Huey sat between them, nervous energy radiating off him in waves. That's not a lot of time for him to break script and do whatever the hell he actually wants. Butcher lowered the binoculars. Mate, I'd be shocked if he makes it 3 minutes before this whole thing goes sideways. Down in the VIP section, Stan Edgar sat with the board members who'd signed off on URUK initiative. None of them looked comfortable. Ashley paced behind them, headset active coordinating with 20 different teams simultaneously. Every cameraman had backup instructions. Every contingency had a contingency. On stage, the 7 stood in formation while a hype video played. Homelander at center, smile bright enough to see from space. But anyone close enough could spot the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw kept clenching between grins. He'd been told to play nice, introduce the new asset, share the spotlight like a professional. He'd nodded and said all the right things in the pre-show meeting. Nobody believed him. The video ended. Pyrotechnics erupted. The crowd roared. Homelander stepped forward, arms raised, drinking in the adoration like oxygen. America, he began, voice carrying across the stadium with practiced ease. I stand before you today, not just as your protector, but as proof of what this great nation can achieve. Standard opening, tested with focus groups. And tonight, we're expanding that promise, bringing someone new into the family. Someone who represents strength that transcends. He never finished the sentence. The air split. Not figuratively, actually tore open reality, peeling back like paper. The golden apertures materialized across the stage, not behind Gilgamesh this time, but everywhere. Above the 7. Beside the speakers, hovering over the crowd like surveillance drones made of light and threat. Gilgamesh walked through the central breach as if stepping through a doorway he'd opened 1,000 times before. No introduction. No announcement. Just arrival. The cameras caught every detail. His presence translated perfectly to broadcast the armor that made stage lights look cheap, the bearing that turned trained superheroes into background extras. When he stopped at center stage, Homelander stood 3 feet to his right. It looked like a king and his servant. Good evening. Gilgamesh's voice needed no amplification. It carried. You've gathered here to worship false idols. How appropriate that I should arrive to correct your misconception. Ashley's voice crackled through every headset simultaneously. Cut to commercial. Cut to commercial now. The director didn't move. Couldn't. Because every camera had locked onto Gilgamesh like iron filings to a magnet. The feeds weren't responding to manual control. They simply wanted to watch. Homelander's smile held. Barely. Ladies and gentlemen, this is silence. Gilgamesh didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. The word landed like a judge's gavel. You don't speak unless given permission. The stadium went quiet. 80,000 people holding their breath. Millions more watching from home. The live stream numbers climbed so fast, the analytics team thought their systems had glitched. In the anchor chamber, 3 stories below the stadium, the Grail shard began to glow. Dr. Chen watched the energy reading spike with something between wonder and horror. It's feeding, she whispered. All that attention, all those eyes. It's converting it to. The readings doubled. Back on stage, Gilgamesh addressed the crowd directly. You call these people heroes. The 7. Guardians. Saviors. He gestured at them without looking. Examine them. truly see what stands before you. One of the hovering portals drifted closer to A-Train. The speedster froze, every instinct screaming at him to run. The gateway's edge passed within inches of his face, and everyone watching saw him flinch. This one. Gilgamesh's tone carried casual assessment. Fast, but hollow, running from something that catches up regardless of speed. The portal moved on. That one, Queen Maeve jaw set, refusing to show fear, strong but weighted down by compromise, wearing the costume of what she might have been. The Deep tried to back away. A golden chain materialized from nowhere, wrapping his ankle. Not tight, just present. And these, Gilgamesh finally acknowledged the seven as a group, are the best you have to offer, the pinnacle of your protection. He shook his head slowly. You've been sold a product, bright packaging, empty contents. They are not heroes. They are advertisements. Homelander moved, not an attack, just a step forward, heat building behind his eyes. That's enough. Is it? Gilgamesh turned to face him fully for the first time. You believe you rule this stage, this crowd, this world. His voice dropped, but the microphones caught it anyway. Every word transmitted globally. Demonstrate your rule then. Show them why they should fear you more than me. It was bait. Obviously bait. Homelander knew it was bait. He took it anyway. The heat vision lashed out twin beams of concentrated energy that could cut through steel. They hit Gilgamesh center mass and stopped, held suspended in the air by a barrier that looked like fractured gold, spreading the energy across its surface like water on glass. The crowd gasped. Some screamed. Most just stared. Homelander poured more power into it. The beams intensified, burning brighter, hot enough that people in the front rows felt the temperature spike. But the barrier held, and Gilgamesh stood behind it with the expression of someone waiting for a child to tire themselves out. When Homelander finally stopped chest heaving, Gilgamesh waved the barrier away, like dismissing smoke. Adequate, he said, for a parlor trick. Then he moved. Not fast, not slow, just inevitable. His hand closed around Homelander's throat, not choking, just holding and lifted. Homelander's feet left the stage. The strongest man alive, suspended in the air by someone who looked bored by the effort. You wanted to be king, Gilgamesh said quietly. Every camera zoomed in, every microphone strained to catch it. Let me show you what kings actually do. The chains erupted from every portal simultaneously. Not attacking, binding. They wrapped Homelander in layers of gold that glowed with their own light, constricting until he couldn't move, couldn't struggle, could only hang there like a trophy displayed for inspection. Then Gilgamesh dropped him. Homelander hit the stage on his knees. The chains held him there upright, but kneeling, forced into a posture of submission he'd never shown in his life. His face twisted rage and humiliation and something that might have been tears if he'd let himself cry. The crowd didn't know how to react. Cheer, scream, run. They just watched. This is your hero, Gilgamesh announced, projecting to the cameras rather than the stadium. Your symbol of strength. Observe how easily the symbol breaks when faced with substance. He circled Homelander, slowly displaying him from every angle. You've been living in a world where power was theater, where strength was scripted, where your protectors were actors, reading lines. In Vought Tower, Edgar pressed the button. The kill switch activated across every system. Neural inhibitors fired. Sonic disruptors engaged. The V protocol's full arsenal deployed at once. Nothing happened. because Gilgamesh had claimed those systems during his boardroom meeting. The codes ran, the triggers fired, but the destination had changed. Every kill switch now reported to him. He smiled just slightly and looked directly into the nearest camera. "Did you truly believe your little safeguards would function against me?" He gestured at Homelander, still bound, still kneeling. "You cannot kill what you do not understand. You cannot contain what you do not own." The other members of the Seven looked at each other, at the exits, at anything except the figure dominating the stage. A-Train took one step backward. The chain around his ankle tightened, not painful, just a reminder. "You will all remain," Gilgamesh said without looking at them. "And bear witness." He returned his attention to the cameras, to the millions watching, to the attention that fed the shard below and kept him stable in this reality. "I have evaluated your world, your systems of power, your hierarchies of strength." He paused, letting the moment expand. "And I find them wanting, built on sand, governed by cowards, protected by frauds." The chains around Homelander constricted slightly, a reminder of who held the leash. "So I will do what kings do when they discover a kingdom mismanaged." Gilgamesh spread his hands and every portal expanded, showing glimpses of vast arsenals beyond. "I will impose order. Not the order you pretend to have committees and boards and contracts written in bad faith. True order, where the strong justify their strength through action, not marketing." Deep in the anchor chamber, Dr. Chen watched the power readings climb past every safety threshold. The shard was drinking in attention faster than they'd ever measured. Not just the stadium. Global viewership. Every screen showing this. Every eye watching. The rift wasn't straining anymore. It was stabilizing. "This world will be evaluated," Gilgamesh continued. "Every institution, every hero, every lie you've been told and chose to believe." The portals drifted through the air like schools of predatory fish. Those who prove worthy will be permitted to continue. Those who fail. The chains tightened around Homelander just enough to make him grunt. Will learn the price of pretending. Silence held the stadium, held the broadcast, held everyone watching across the world. Then Gilgamesh released the chains. Homelander dropped forward, catching himself on his hands, gasping. The restraints vanished back into whatever impossible space they'd come from. When he looked up, murder lived in his eyes. "VotCon is concluded," Gilgamesh announced. "Return to your homes, discuss what you've witnessed, and consider carefully." He looked directly into the camera again. "Who you believe rules this world now?" He walked off stage through a portal that opened and closed behind him like a door, left behind Homelander on his knees. The Seven frozen in place, a crowd of 80,000 too stunned to move, and camera feeds broadcasting globally, numbers still climbing attention, converting to power, somewhere deep below. Ashley was the first to find her voice. "Get medical to the stage. Get Homelander to his, get him somewhere private. Spin team, I need talking points in 30 seconds. Legal start drafting, I don't even know what, just draft something." But the damage was done. The world had watched their greatest hero kneel. And everyone now knew someone stronger had arrived to claim the throne. In a basement facility 12 blocks away, Billy Butcher rewound the footage on a tablet, watching Gilgamesh's final statement again. "Well," he said to MM and Huey, "we're well and truly fucked, aren't we?" MM didn't answer. He was too busy calculating how much worse this could get. The answer, as they'd learn, was significantly. The footage played on a loop across every screen in the safe house. Homelander on the ground, 80,000 people watching him break. The moment replayed in slow motion, in high definition, from 12 different angles. Butcher turned it off. Right then, he looked at his team. MM checking weapons inventory. Frenchie rewiring something that probably shouldn't be rewired. Huey staring at his laptop like it held answers instead of more questions. We all agree this is properly fucked. Comprehensively, MM confirmed without looking up from a disassembled rifle. Guy just humiliated the most dangerous soup on the planet in front of a global audience. Homelander's gonna snap. Question is when, not if. Huey pulled up analytics on his screen. The live stream hit 200 million concurrent viewers. That's bigger than the Super Bowl. Bigger than anything. He scrolled through social media feeds, all showing the same clips, the same screenshots. People are calling him a god, an alien, some kind of judgment from I don't even know. He's a weapon, Butcher said flatly. Ancient, powerful, and completely out of anyone's control, including ours. He leaned against the table, studying the frozen frame of Gilgamesh on the monitor. Which brings us to the shit question of the evening. What do we do about it? Frenchie looked up from his work. We do nothing, Non. This is not our fight. Let the gods destroy each other. We survive in the spaces between. Except there won't be any spaces, MM countered. You saw what he did. Took over Vought's security systems, made their kill switch his personal toy. That shard thing keeping him here is feeding on attention, and he just got the entire world's eyeballs. He assembled the rifle with practiced efficiency. He's not going anywhere, and Homelander's not going to let that stand. So we're caught between two unstoppable forces. Huey's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been running this scenario in his head for hours. Great. Love that for us. Butcher pulled out a tablet, swiping through files they'd lifted from Vought's servers before Gilgamesh claimed them. Technical specifications, Project URUK documentation, images of the shard and the anchor system keeping the rift stable. He's not unstoppable, Butcher said slowly. He's got a tether. That anchor 3 floors under the stadium. Without it, the rift collapses and Golden Boy gets sent back to wherever the hell he came from. MM stopped mid-motion. You want to destroy it. I want options. Right now, we've got none. Destroying the anchor could collapse reality in a 6-block radius. Huey read from his laptop, pulling up Dr. Chen's leaked notes. It says here the rift is barely stable even with the system running. If we just blow it, we don't just blow it. Butcher switched the monitor back on, freezing on a different frame. Gilgamesh walking off stage through one of his portals. We use leverage, information. The one thing that Prick actually seemed to respect. What information? Frenchie asked. We know nothing he doesn't already know better. We know where Vought's backing up their URUK data. MM pulled up schematics on his own device. Off-site facility in Newark. Black site technically doesn't exist. If they've got redundancy protocols, they do. Huey was already typing, fingers flying across keys. Found references in the server dumps. Project URUK wasn't just about Gilgamesh. They were planning for multiple, whatever he is, multiple summonings. The room went quiet. Fuck me sideways, Butcher breathed. They wanted an army of these bastards. They wanted controllable ones. Huey turned his laptop around, showing encrypted files with timestamp metadata. These backups are recent. Like updated yesterday recent. Vought's already planning their next move. Butcher's mind worked through possibilities, discarding bad options and worse ones. So we've got intel. Question is what we do with it. We could leak it, Huey suggested. Show the world that Vought was trying to. Nobody would care. MM's voice held bitter certainty. Not after what they'd just watched. Gilgamesh proved he's stronger than their supposed heroes. People don't want explanations right now. They want to know if they're safe. Then we give him the intel, Frenchie said. We tell the King of Heroes that Vought planned to summon more like him. Let him decide what to do with that information. That's insane, Huey protested. We'd be helping him. We'd be pointing him at Vought, Butcher corrected. Enemy of my enemy and all that ancient bollocks. He pulled up a secure messaging interface, anonymous encrypted routing through 17 proxy servers. But we don't just hand it over. We make it look like a gift from his new subjects. Caught on first. The attention feeds him, the worship. We play into that. We use their own game against them. Butcher started typing. Every feed, every camera, every live stream, they're all still talking about him. Still showing his face. Still making him stronger. His fingers paused over the keyboard. So we add to the noise, just differently. The message took shape: clinical, informative, deferential, without being obsequious. Details about the Newark facility, coordinates, security protocols, and buried in the metadata, a single line that would parse as advertisement code to automated systems, but read clear as day to anyone actually looking. Your throne has rivals in storage. That's it. Frenchie peered at the screen. No demands, no requests. We're not in a position to demand anything. Butcher encrypted the file, attached the stolen technical documents, and queued it for broadcast through every compromised system they could access. Not direct contact. Nothing traceable to them specifically, just information drifting through the digital infrastructure like a gift from concerned citizens, or frightened ones. He hit send. The message propagated across networks, embedding itself in trending threads and viral posts. Hidden in plain sight, a whisper in the digital noise that Gilgamesh had proven he could hear. Now what? Huey asked. Now we wait and see if he takes the bait. Butcher shut down the tablet, and we prepare for the possibility that we just made everything significantly worse. Always the optimist, muttered. 3 hours later, in a penthouse suite Gilgamesh had claimed through the simple expedient of wanting it, the King of Heroes stood before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. The city sprawled beneath him, unaware that its hierarchy had fundamentally shifted. A notification appeared on every screen in the room simultaneously, not pushed by any app or service. Just there, as if the information itself had decided to manifest. He read it with interest that gradually became amusement. Clever. His voice carried to empty air. Frightened, but clever. They understand the proper way to approach power gifts, not demands. Information instead of confrontation. The technical documents scrolled across screens. Backup facilities. Redundancy protocols. Evidence that Vought had planned for contingencies even after summoning him. Planning to summon more. As if he could be mass-produced. As if there could be more than one king. The insult was almost refreshing in its audacity. Gilgamesh pulled up the facility coordinates, cross-referencing them with Vaught's stolen infrastructure maps. Newark, Industrial District, hardened against conventional assault. Protected by security systems that assumed threats would come from outside rather than above. Assumptions were always such fragile things. But the message's final line interested him more than the logistics. Your throne has rivals in storage. Not a warning. An offering. Someone, and he had suspicions about who had chosen to feed him information, rather than attempt opposition. They'd learned faster than he'd expected. He opened a portal, this one different from the treasury gates, smaller, more precise. It showed the Newark facility from above, security patrols visible as thermal signatures against concrete and steel. "So," he murmured, "they think to direct me. Point the weapon at a target of their choosing." The portal expanded slightly, showing more detail. How presumptuous. He smiled. How appropriate. The portal collapsed. Another opened in its place, this one showing Homelander's penthouse across the city. The supposed strongest man alive sitting in darkness, trembling with rage he couldn't release. Bound by image management and the very cameras that had watched him fall. Still dangerous. Still useful. Gilgamesh closed that viewing portal as well. Decision made. He would visit this Newark facility. Verify what his anonymous benefactors claimed. Determine what Vought thought they could accomplish with redundancy plans and backup protocols. But not yet. First, he would let the wound fester. Let Homelander stew in his humiliation. Let Vought scramble to contain fallout that couldn't be contained. Let the world continue feeding attention into the shard that anchored him here. Let them all believe they had time to adapt. Then he would show them what happened when kings discovered rivals. Back in the safe house, Butcher watched traffic analysis on the anonymous message. It had been accessed. Read. The source trace dead-ended exactly where they designed it to, nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. He got it. Huey confirmed monitoring digital activity from Gilgamesh's claimed locations. He's definitely got it. Good. Butcher poured himself a drink he'd been saving for catastrophes. This qualified. Now we see if he's predictable. And if he's not, MM asked. Butcher downed the whiskey in one swallow. Then we're no more fucked than we already were. It wasn't comforting, but it was honest. And in a world where gods walked and heroes broke, honesty was the last weapon they had left. The assault on Vought Tower began without warning and with absolute precision. Gilgamesh didn't announce his arrival, didn't issue demands or ultimatums. He simply appeared in the executive lobby at 3 a.m. when security was minimal and oversight teams had gone home. The few guards present reached for weapons they never drew, frozen by something older than fear, the recognition that they stood before a force that rendered resistance meaningless. "Vacate this floor," he said calmly. "Tell your superiors their audit has begun." They ran. The building's internal alarms triggered 90 seconds later, but by then Gilgamesh had already claimed the elevator systems. Every car moved at his discretion, carrying him upward while sealing others in place. Security feeds showed him ascending through Vaught's levels like a tide that couldn't be stopped, deliberate, unhurried, inevitable. In the crisis management bunker on sublevel 4, Stan Edgar watched the feeds with the expression of a man calculating acceptable losses. Ashley stood beside him, tablets shaking in her hands, coordinating evacuations that felt increasingly pointless. "He's heading for the data core," she reported, voice tight. "Server farm on 63. If he accesses, he already has access." Edgar's tone carried the flat certainty of someone facing a checkmate they'd seen coming for moves. "Everything we stored digitally," he claimed during our first meeting. "This isn't about information." He zoomed in on the feed, showing Gilgamesh examining a wall display of Vaught's corporate timeline. "He's making a point." What point? That nothing here belongs to us anymore. The treasury gates manifested throughout the tower, not attacking, but present. Hovering in hallways, drifting through conference rooms. Each one a reminder that walls and locks meant nothing to someone who could open holes in reality itself. Gilgamesh reached the executive floor without encountering meaningful resistance. The few soups Vought had stationed inside the building, B-listers' failures, those not important enough for the Seven, took one look at what had humiliated Homelander and made themselves scarce. He walked through Stan Edgar's office, running fingers across the desk where decisions affecting millions had been made. Photos on the wall showed Edgar with presidents, with senators, with the architects of modern power. Gilgamesh studied them the way someone might examine artifacts in a museum. "Influence?" he murmured. "The currency you valued above all others. Who you knew, who owed you favors, who feared exposure." A golden aperture opened beside the wall, and the photos began sliding through one by one. All of it predicated on secrecy, on controlled information. He moved to the window overlooking Manhattan. Dawn approached, painting the skyline in shades of amber and gold. "But I have removed your control. Every secret you hoarded now public. Every leverage point now visible. You've been stripped of the only power that mattered to you." He turned from the window. "How does it feel to be merely wealthy?" 3 floors below. The boys moved through Vought's sublevels, using security access codes had lifted weeks ago. The chaos of Gilgamesh's arrival provided cover they desperately needed. "This is insane," Huey whispered, watching staff evacuate past them. "We're inside Vought Tower while a god tears it apart from the top down." "Best time to sneak in," Butcher countered, checking the schematic on his phone. "Everyone's looking up. Nobody's watching the basement." He pointed down a corridor. "Anchor chamber is 2 levels below us. We confirm the backup protocols, grab what we can get out before the ceiling comes down." Checked his weapon. "And if we run into him?" "We don't." Butcher's voice held more certainty than he felt. "He's playing with Vought, making them watch while he takes their toys apart. We're beneath his notice." "Let's keep it that way," Frenchie added, working on a locked security door. "The mouse does not challenge the cat. The mouse steals the cheese while the cat plays with the other mouse." The door clicked open. They descended into infrastructure most Vought employees never knew existed, the guts of the URUK initiative, where technology and mythology intersected in ways that broke conventional physics. The anchor chamber hummed with power. Dr. Chen sat at a monitoring station, too focused on her readings to notice their arrival immediately. When she did look up, her expression showed less surprise than exhaustion. "You're here to destroy it," she said flatly. "Not a question." "Here to understand it," corrected. "The backup facility in Newark, is it operational?" Chen hesitated, then apparently decided cooperation. Beat whatever consequences Vought might threaten. It was. "We initiated transfer protocols when Gilgamesh began his ascent. Data equipment, a fragment of the shard." She pulled up schematics showing parallel systems. "The board approved redundancy measures after VaughtCon. They want insurance in case this goes wrong." "In case?" Butcher laughed without humor. "Love this went wrong the moment you opened that box. Now you're trying to do it twice. They want control." Chen's voice cracked slightly. "They always want control. Even when facing something that can't be controlled, they try to build a cage for it." Huey examined the anchor's readouts numbers, scrolling past faster than he could process. "These energy levels, they're higher than your initial projections. Way higher. Because the entire world is watching him now." Chen pulled up global analytics news coverage, social media, every camera phone and broadcast feed showing Gilgamesh's face. "The attention feeds the shard, makes the rift more stable. We estimated he'd need constant media presence to maintain manifestation. But after VaughtCon, She gestured at graphs spiking off their scales. He's self-sustaining, maybe permanently. And Butcher exchanged glances. So destroying the anchor wouldn't send him back, said slowly. It might destabilize local reality, collapse space-time in an expanding radius. But him, Chen shook her head. He's woven into our world's fabric now. Too many people believe he exists. Too much collective consciousness affirming his presence. Bloody hell. Butcher stared at the shard pulsing with light that didn't come from any electrical source. You've made him permanent. We've made him inevitable. Chen shut down her terminal. And Vought's already planning the next one, because that's what they do. They don't learn, they iterate. Above them, Gilgamesh had reached the server farm. Rows of machines processing petabytes of data surveillance footage, financial records, blackmail material spanning decades. The digital backbone of Vought's power structure. He didn't destroy it. That would be crude. Instead, he accessed it directly, pulling data through his treasury like someone withdrawing funds from a vault. Files began streaming through the golden gates, not random, but curated. Every compromise Vought had orchestrated, every cover-up, every body they'd buried, literally or figuratively. And then he pushed it all outward. Every screen in the tower lit up simultaneously. Security monitors, employee computers, the massive displays in the lobby showing promotional content. All of them now broadcasting Vought's complete history of corruption in high definition. Beyond the building, the data propagated through networks Gilgamesh had claimed. Social media feeds, news sites, government databases. A cascade of truth that couldn't be recalled or contained. In the bunker, Edgar watched his company's secrets hemorrhage across the world in real time. His hand didn't shake. His expression didn't change. He simply observed the systematic dismantling of everything he'd built. Sir, Ashley's voice barely qualified as sound. What do we do? Nothing. Edgar stood straightening his tie with the same precision he used for every corporate meeting. We wait for him to finish. Then we calculate what's left. He paused at the bunker door, and we pray that whatever comes next still has room for survivors. The boys emerged from the anchor chamber with proof of the Newark facility, but no solution. No way to stop what had already been set in motion. They moved through evacuating crowds, just more faces in the chaos. We gave him the intel about the backup, Huey said as they reached the street. We pointed him at Newark. Did we just make this worse? Worse than what? Butcher looked up at Vought Tower lights flickering as Gilgamesh continued his methodical pillaging. He's already won. We're just trying to make sure when the dust settles, there's still a world left. MM's phone buzzed. Messages from contacts in law enforcement, government media, all reporting the same thing. Vought's files everywhere. Evidence of crimes spanning decades. Enough material to keep prosecutors busy for years. He's not destroying them, realized. He's exposing them, making it impossible to hide anymore. Because that's what you do to conquered territory, Butcher said quietly. You don't burn it. You reorganize it. Strip away the old power structure, establish new rules. He watched emergency services arrive too late to matter. He's not invading, he's governing. Inside the tower, Gilgamesh completed his cataloging of Vought's assets. Physical resources mattered less than the infrastructure of control. The networks, the leverage, the fear that had made the company untouchable. All of it now his. He stood in the empty boardroom where Edgar had tried to offer him a contract. The chairs where executives had plotted to control him sat vacant, their occupants fled or hiding. Through the windows, Manhattan's skyline greeted another dawn. A notification appeared across multiple screens, not from Vaught's systems, but from his own network of claimed resources. Security footage from Newark, the backup facility activating. Personnel arriving to implement their redundancy protocols. Gilgamesh smiled. How persistent, he said to the empty room. How foolish. He opened a viewing portal showing the facility in detail. Scientists preparing equipment, security establishing perimeter, a smaller shard fragment being positioned in its own anchor array. They thought themselves clever, thought they'd learned from their first mistake. They hadn't learned nearly enough. But they would. He closed the portal and turned to leave. Behind him, Vought Tower stood gutted of secrets and stripped of mystique, still a building, still functional, but no longer special. Just architecture and hubris exposed to daylight. The real power had already moved on, and it was heading to Newark. Homelander found him at the Newark facility 3 hours before dawn. The compound sprawled across 4 acres of industrial wasteland concrete bunkers, reinforced against conventional assault, surrounded by fencing that hummed with lethal voltage. Security teams patrolled in tactical formation, armed with weapons designed to stop superhumans. Inside, scientists prepared to repeat Vaught's greatest mistake with the arrogance of people who believed they'd learned from failure. None of it mattered. Gilgamesh stood at the facility's center courtyard, arms crossed, waiting. Not hiding, not infiltrating, simply present, as if the walls and guards existed for someone else's benefit. When Homelander descended from the sky cape, billowing in the pre-dawn wind, his landing cratered the asphalt. His eyes glowed red with barely restrained heat. Every muscle coiled with rage that had festered since VaughtCon, since being forced down, since the world watched him break. No cameras this time, Homelander said, voice raw. No audience, no stage. He took a step forward, concrete cracking under his boot. Just you and me, and I'm going to show you what happens when you humiliate a god. Gilgamesh regarded him with the interest one might give an insect displaying unexpected persistence. You're not a god, he said quietly. You're a product that learned to speak. And even now, covered in your own shame, you still perform. He gestured at Homelander's stance, the theatrical posture. Still playing to cameras that aren't there. Still desperate for validation you'll never receive. I don't need validation. Homelander's fists clenched, leather gloves creaking. I need to feel your spine break. Then make your attempt. Homelander moved with speed that blurred reality. His punch carried enough force to level buildings, to shatter steel, to end anything born of flesh and blood. It connected with Gilgamesh's jaw, or should have. Instead, it met a barrier that formed between them, invisible until impact, and the shockwave rippled outward in concentric rings that shattered every window in the facility. Alarms shrieked, security forces scattered. Inside the bunkers, scientists abandoned their equipment and ran for exits that suddenly seemed very far away. Homelander pressed harder, pouring strength into the blow until his arm trembled. The barrier held. On its surface, golden patterns emerged, not technology, not science, but something older. Authority given form. You've improved, Gilgamesh observed, unmoved behind his defense. Desperation makes you somewhat less predictable. He waved his hand casually, and the barrier exploded outward, sending Homelander tumbling across the courtyard like a discarded toy. The strongest man alive caught himself mid-flight, reoriented, and came back faster. This time with heat vision blazing twin beams that could cut through reinforced steel. They hit Gilgamesh dead center and split around him like water around stone. "Adequate," Gilgamesh said, the beams still washing over him harmlessly. "But you're using a tool without understanding its nature. Power isn't volume. It's precision, intent, purpose." He stepped forward through the assault as if walking through rain. "You scream with your abilities. I speak with mine." His hand shot out faster than Homelander could track and caught the hero by the throat, not choking, just holding. The heat vision cut off immediately as Homelander's concentration shattered. "This is where you die," Homelander gasped, fingers scrabbling at the grip. "This is where you, what?" Gilgamesh lifted him effortlessly. "Kill me, you can't. Defeat me, you lack the capacity. Intimidate me." He smiled without warmth. "You're still thinking like a bully who's never faced actual consequence." He threw Homelander into the main bunker. The impact demolished the wall, and the hero crashed through laboratories and server rooms before finally stopping against a concrete pillar that cracked under the collision. Inside, emergency protocols activated. The backup shard, smaller than the original, but still potent, pulsed with unstable energy. The anchor system meant to contain it sparked and failed containment fields, collapsing under the stress of Homelander's entrance. Gilgamesh walked through the breach in the wall, surveying the damage. Scientists cowered behind overturned equipment. Guards aimed weapons they didn't fire, survival instinct overriding training. "You tried to recreate what you cannot comprehend." Gilgamesh addressed the room at large, his voice carrying absolute clarity despite the chaos. "Built cages for forces beyond your measurement. And now," he looked at the failing containment, "you've created a hazard from your own foolishness." Homelander pulled himself from the rubble, blood at the corner of his mouth. Not much, not serious. But there, the first time he'd bled in years. He lasered everything, indiscriminate, desperate. Heat vision sweeping across the room, cutting through equipment, through walls, through the containment system holding the shard. Metal screamed. Concrete vaporized. And the rift, small, unstable, barely controlled, began to tear wider. Reality cracked. Not metaphorically. The air itself split, showing darkness beyond that held no stars, no light, nothing recognizable as space or matter. A void that pulled at the edges of existence like a wound trying to close but unable to heal. Gilgamesh's expression shifted. Not fear, but recognition. "Fool," he said softly. "Absolute fool." The golden gates manifested by the hundreds, not weapons, now supports, braces holding reality together where Homelander's rampage had torn it open. Each gate anchored to something beyond physics, using Gilgamesh's treasury itself as buttressing against collapse. But the rift continued expanding. Gilgamesh reached into the largest gate and withdrew something no one present had seen before. A sword, if something so ancient and absolute could be called merely a sword. 3 segments rotating slowly around a central axis, grinding against reality itself. The space around it rippled, distorted, bent inward, as if unable to tolerate the weapon's presence. The sword of rupture. Homelander recognized power when he saw it. Even through his rage, through his desperation, some survival instinct finally triggered. He froze. "That," his voice cracked. "What is that? The edge of annihilation." Gilgamesh held the blade loosely, almost carelessly, but the air around it had begun to warp visibly. A weapon that severs the boundaries between possibility and void. Normally I would demonstrate. Normally I would show you what true power accomplishes. The sword's rotation accelerated slightly. The rift responded, pulsing as if recognizing kinship. But you've created a problem. Gilgamesh looked at the expanding tear in reality. If I unleash this here, the cascade becomes irreversible. This facility vanishes. The city beyond follows. And everything I've claimed, all the territory I've systematically acquired, collapses into that emptiness. Understanding dawned slowly across Homelander's battered face. You can't use it. I choose not to. Gilgamesh's grip on Ea tightened. Because unlike you, I understand the difference between power and tantrum. You would destroy what you cannot rule. I rule what I choose not to destroy. He drove the sword not into Homelander, but into the ground, into the rift itself. The effect was immediate and absolute. The tear stopped expanding. The void beyond shuddered, compressed, forced back into whatever dimensional space it had emerged from. Reality sealed around the blade like flesh around a wound, and he held it closed through sheer existential authority. But the sword remained embedded, anchoring, containing. A plug stopping total collapse. Gilgamesh stepped back from it, expression unreadable. This stays, he said, addressing Homelander, but projecting to everyone present. If removed, the rift reopens, wider, faster, irreversibly. He gestured at the facility around them. Congratulations. You've created a permanent hazard that requires my constant attention to prevent catastrophe. Homelander stared at the sword, at the way space itself seemed to bow around it. I didn't mean to. You never mean to. Gilgamesh's voice carried contempt that cut deeper than any blade. You act without thought. Destroy without consideration. You're given power and use it like a child. Throwing stones, damaging whatever's convenient, caring only for the satisfaction of impact. He walked toward Homelander, who actually backed away. You call yourself the strongest, the greatest, a god among insects. Gilgamesh stopped just out of reach, and his voice dropped to something quiet and absolute. But you're not even worthy of being called human. You're a mongrel dressed in symbols you don't comprehend, playing at divinity, while proving only your own inadequacy. The word hit Homelander like physical force. Mongrel, reduced, dismissed. Everything he feared being spoken aloud, with casual certainty. You're pathetic, Gilgamesh continued. And the only reason you continue breathing is because killing you requires effort I find wasteful. You're not worth the expenditure. He turned away, already moving toward the exit. Homelander's hands shook. His jaw clenched. Every instinct screamed at him to attack, to prove himself, to do something. But he'd seen what happened when he tried. And some small, terrified part of him recognized that Gilgamesh was right. Outside, dawn had fully broken. The boys arrived in a stolen van just as Gilgamesh emerged from the facility, walking past security forces that parted like water before him. Butcher watched through binoculars, tracking the King of Heroes as he opened a viewing portal and simply vanished into golden light. Homelander's still alive in there, MM reported, monitoring police frequencies. Injured but mobile. Facilities compromised but standing. And that sword thing, Huey asked, pulling up drone footage that showed the weapon embedded in the courtyard reality, still visibly distorted around it. Still there. Butcher lowered the binoculars. Which means Gilgamesh can't leave. Not really. Not if pulling that thing out causes another bloody apocalypse. They sat in silence, processing. So we've got one contained god? MM said slowly. And one broken psychopath who just got told he's worthless. Fantastic. Butcher started the van. And I'm sure both of those situations will stay stable and not explode in our faces. Back inside the facility, Homelander stood alone in the ruined laboratory. Scientists had fled. Guards had evacuated. Only him and the sword remained that terrible weapon. Still anchored in reality, he looked at his reflection in a broken mirror. Blood on his face. Dirt on his suit. The invincible image shattered. In Vought Tower's remains, Victoria Newman sat in Stan Edgar's former office surveying reports from her intelligence network. Gilgamesh had carved through the company's infrastructure, exposed their secrets, claimed their assets. But the power vacuum he'd created, that was opportunity. Her phone displayed the Newark facility footage. The sword. The rift. A permanent problem requiring permanent management. Interesting, she murmured, already calculating, already planning. Because in a world where gods walked and heroes fell, power didn't vanish. It simply changed hands, and she'd always been very good at catching what others dropped. Across the world in facilities that officially didn't exist, analysts studied the same footage. Military strategists ran simulations. Research teams examined every frame of Gilgamesh's abilities, looking for weaknesses that might not exist. Because humanity had a long history of trying to cage things stronger than themselves. And failing had never stopped them from trying again. In a penthouse that now belonged to him, by simple declaration, Gilgamesh stood before windows, overlooking Manhattan. The city sprawled beneath him, still functioning, still ignorant of how close it had come to erasure. He'd claimed territory, exposed corruption, demonstrated absolute superiority. But Ia remained buried in Newark, a chain he'd forged for himself, a reminder that even conquest had its costs. The sword would hold. Reality would remain stable. But it meant he couldn't simply leave. Couldn't abandon this world without risking the very collapse he'd prevented. He'd won his war, and in doing so bound himself to his victory. How fitting, he said to the empty room, to be trapped by one's own power, to become jailer of the very prison one constructed. The city lights glittered below, unaware, unconcerned, waiting to see what their new ruler would do with the world he'd claimed. And somewhere in the dark spaces between realities, other fragments of other shards pulsed with potential. Other doors waiting to be opened, other kings waiting to be summoned. Because Vought's greatest mistake wasn't summoning Gilgamesh. It was proving that summoning was possible. And now that possibility existed in the world, like a virus waiting to spread. The question wasn't whether someone would try again. The question was when, and what would answer the call. Another purely entertaining what-if story where two supreme beings finally collide. As expected, the brutal law of the jungle plays out once again. The bigger predator devours the smaller one. Homelander loses the one thing he needed, more than anything else, the worship of the people. He is still a soup, but now he is nothing. No longer the strongest. No longer a god in the eyes of the public. His spirit is completely broken. As for Gilgamesh, he chooses to rule a world he himself considers garbage rather than destroy it outright. Perhaps this, in its own twisted way, is the mercy of an all-powerful king.